Welcome to AI for Everyone, the podcast that demystifies artificial intelligence and makes it useful for everyone, especially teachers, students, employees, small business owners, and lifelong learners. I'm your host, Brett Hanson, a 25-year veteran teacher with years of experience exploring, implementing, and teaching AI. As a Google and ISTE educator, I'm here to help you navigate this quickly changing world with confidence, curiosity, and a focus on ethical, practical use. Each month, we'll explore AI from 4 different perspectives important to everyone. So whether you're new to AI or ready to level up, you're in the right place. Let's get started. There are few moments when a new idea or technology feels less like a gentle current and more like a tsunami building on the horizon. You can feel the power in it, the immense potential, but also a sense of unease about its size and speed. For many of us, that's what AI feels like. It's exciting, but it's also concerning. Today, on our AI in Focus episode, we're going to dive deep into a book that perfectly captures this feeling. It's called The Coming Wave: Technology, Power, and the 21st Century's Greatest Dilemma. And it was written by someone who has been standing right at the heart of AI since the beginning, Mustafa Suleyman. Suleyman isn't just an observer. He co-founded DeepMind, the pioneering AI lab now part of Google, and he's currently the CEO of Microsoft AI. He's been helping build these incredibly powerful systems, and his message is one of urgency, complexity, and profound importance for all of us. He argues that we are standing at the edge of an era defined by the convergence of 2 monumental forces: artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. And just like a literal wave, these technologies hold the power to create and nurture, to bring unimaginable prosperity, but also to unleash the destruction if we don't learn how to navigate them with wisdom and foresight, if we don't learn how to control them. And we must start now. For thousands of years, the human story has been one of harnessing nature and building tools to amplify our own abilities. We learned to make fire, to farm the land, to build machines. And each of these moments was a wave of innovation that restructured and reshaped society. Think about the printing press, the steam engine, or the internet. These were what economists call general purpose technologies. They spread everywhere, transform almost everything, and eventually become indispensable parts of our world. This is where Suleyman's argument points to a new problem. He argues that this coming wave of AI and synthetic biology is fundamentally different from all the ones that came before. And he points to 4 unique characteristics that make them unlike anything we've ever had to manage as a species. First, there's asymmetry. These tools give a disproportionate amount of power to individuals and small groups. Think about it. A single person or a small dedicated team could soon have capabilities that were once reserved only for nation states. Think of terrorists. Think of overly ambitious politicians. And unfortunately in America, think of mass shooters and people who have lost touch with reality. It's scary. The second characteristic he calls hyper-evolution. These technologies aren't just getting better. We can all see it all around us every day. They're getting better at an accelerating rate, at an exponential rate. They are getting much better, much, much, much faster. And in many cases, they are learning and evolving on their own. Third is what he calls omni-use. Omni-use AI tools are incredibly versatile, with applications in every single field you can imagine. And this is a double-edged sword. The very same AI model that could help discover a cure for cancer might, in the wrong hands, be used to design a new bioweapon. And finally, the fourth characteristic is autonomy. More and more, these systems can operate, make decisions, and even conduct their own research and development with minimal supervision from humans. Now, these four traits aren't separate. They're tangled together, which makes them even more difficult to manage. And this creates a feedback loop that actively pushes back against our traditional ways of control. It's like trying to control a literal wave that's getting bigger faster than you can measure or imagine, and the wave can't be harnessed by anyone with any current tools, all while it seems to have a mind of its own. This is an unprecedented technological and social challenge for humanity, and we have to start now. So if that's the challenge, if he's right, what does it mean for us? This brings us to what Suleyman calls the great dilemma. He argues that we are caught between three futures we don't want. And our job is to find a very narrow path through the middle. On one side of that potential path, or on one side of that option of that middle narrow path, is what he calls catastrophe. This is what happens if we fail to contain the wave. Imagine engineered pandemics far worse than what we've seen, autonomous weapons that escalate conflicts beyond any human control, or a total collapse of social trust because of an infocalypse, like a apocalypse but with information. An endless flood of AI-generated lies or disinformation. This is the raw, destructive force of the wave left unchecked. To make it real, he gives a chilling statistic. An engineered virus with just a 4% transmission rate and a 50% fatality rate could kill 1 billion people in a matter of months. And the combination of synthetic biology and AI can create such an engineered virus. Now, on the other side of the narrow path is dystopia. And this is what could happen if we try to control the wave with total brute force. To eliminate every possible risk might require a global authoritarian surveillance state, one that crushes individual liberty and stops innovation in its tracks. It would be like building a concrete wall across the entire ocean. You might stop the waves or manage them, but you'd suffocate every living thing inside those walls. Now, sometimes it seems to me that the United States is more inclined toward catastrophe. That because of our strong feelings of independent and individual rights, that we would rather see very difficult, bad situations than to curb our liberties. And China is more likely to be on the other side, creating more and more dystopia, more and more total control. And then, the European Union is somewhere in between. Now, there's another option, the third option, which is stagnation. And some people argue that we should just stop, pull the plug on all of this. I don't know how that would happen, but that's the argument. But Suleyman dismisses this as a bad idea because the very technologies that pose these immense risks are also our best hope for solving the existential threats that we already face. Things like climate change, resource scarcity, and incurable diseases. To choose stagnation is, in his view, to accept defeat by the crises of today. And throughout this process, always come back to the issue of climate change because it's very different, but it's vast on that same scale. I mean, we want to make changes for climate change, but often the suggestions wind up hurting poor people, especially in the global south. It's just very complicated. And so stagnation would, again, harm people who want to grow, who want to expand, and who need these technologies, perhaps even more than someone like me. Now, stagnation, in other words, is kind of like denying yourself the life-giving rain you need to grow your crops because you're afraid of the possibility of a storm or the real storm. And sometimes you just have to deal with the storm. So this leads us to the heart of Suleyman's argument, what he calls the containment problem. He says that for the first time in our history, our main challenge isn't to unleash a technology's power, but to contain it. He's not arguing for a ban, but for something I think is actually harder, a whole new mindset of stewardship and responsibility. So think about that wave again. Remember in this podcast, we compare AI to water, and the title of his book is The Coming Wave. We don't try to stop the ocean if there are problems with waves or storms. Instead, we build harbors, we erect lighthouses, we construct seawalls. The Army Corps of Engineers tries to develop a way to channel water into different directions. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. We develop incredibly sophisticated weather forecasting, and we teach people how to swim and how to properly manage boats and when not to be on the water. And so it's really all about respect and understanding and building a robust infrastructure for living alongside such immense power. But as Suleyman points out, history shows us that containing technology is incredibly difficult. And while I was reading this section of the book, I could not stop thinking to myself, we're just not going to be able to do this. I hope I'm wrong. I really am. The Ottoman Empire tried to ban the printing press. But something as simple as that was futile. One of the examples that's used often is nuclear and how we successfully managed that. But even the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is fragile, and we've had many close calls. Unfortunately, we haven't had any more nuclear explosions, but it's created an enormous amount of tension, and it's really more kind of on hold, and I hope it stays paused. But it's different. And the reason it's different is that AI and biotech are far harder to contain than nuclear weapons. Nuclear technology requires rare materials and massive, easily detectable facilities, at least now. But AI and biotech are based on information. They get cheaper, more powerful, and harder to track every single year. One of the big stories this summer has been the incredible drop in the cost of actual AI work. Now, at the same time, companies and people are using AI so much more, it's still a very expensive part of society, but the actual cost to run a certain process has dropped dramatically. Biotech and AI are getting cheaper, and that's a good thing, but that makes it available for more and more people. The tools are digital, they're diffused, and unfortunately they can be developed by anyone almost anywhere. And this makes it much more difficult to control than something like nuclear power or nuclear explosions. A huge obstacle to solving this containment problem is a psychological bias Suleyman calls pessimism aversion. This is our collective human tendency to downplay, ignore, or outright reject negative scenarios, especially in the worlds of technology and policy. And I'm embarrassed to admit that when I read this, I knew immediately that this described me. I am an optimist. I'm a positive person. I enjoy life. I'm happy. And I'll often just push aside things that I can't influence. And that's not going to work with this current situation. It's always easier and certainly more profitable to focus on the amazing upsides and believe that any problems can just be fixed later. We see it all around us in American society. We see it in our schools, we see it in our businesses, we see it in the environment. But this bias prevents us from doing a clear-eyed, honest assessment of the real risks. It's like standing on the beach admiring the beauty and strangeness of a powerful tide being sucked out to sea while refusing to acknowledge the possibility of a tsunami. I'll never forget watching the footage of the tsunami arriving in Indonesia when those people were all on the beach, and many of them were just amazed at how the water was just rushing out to sea, and they walked out further and further and further, and only after it was too late did they realize that that was a tsunami on the horizon. And the person I remember the most was this woman who had finally turned and started to run. She looked like an older woman, and she was just enveloped. So we can't be seduced by the positives and reject the negatives. So what's his solution? He lays out a comprehensive, multi-layered 10-point plan for containment. And these aren't separate ideas that can be implemented differently. They're interdependent strategies that all have to be pursued at the same time. Now, I'll just mention a few. If you really want to understand all of them, you either have to do a far deeper research or read the book yourself. The first, or it's not in order, but one of the important ones that's easy to understand and remember is he calls for a massive investment in safety research at the level, he says, of like Apollo level investment. When the United States was stunned and shocked that the Russians had launched Sputnik and that they had taken the lead in the space race, they invested whatever was necessary in the Apollo program to move us toward getting a man in space and getting a person on the moon. So he thinks that if we're going to pour billions into making these systems more powerful, we have to pour even more into making them safe. He calls for independent audits with verification, where third-party regulators have full-stack access to check the safety of frontier AI models. Full-stack access just means that they can see all of the components in the process. And this speaks directly to one of our core ideas on this show. We reiterate over and over again to always check your sources, the process. The R in swimmer is to review results, and it applies to everything. But it's much simpler, really. It comes down to 3 words: never trust AI. I use AI on an almost daily basis now, but I never trust it completely. And we shouldn't do that with our large AI systems that are going to be such powerful influences in our society. He also proposes managing what he calls choke points, like regulating access to the advanced semiconductor chips needed to train massive models. I don't fully understand the government's position right now, but it seems like we're heading in the opposite direction with this. And critically, he says governments must urgently build their own in-house technical expertise so they can actually understand what they're trying to regulate, instead of just relying on the industry to tell them what's going on. This is another important step that does not seem to be going in the right direction right now, at least not in the United States. So this is mainly about building the skills and confidence, not just for individuals, but for society, which of course is an important part of this podcast and my program and my goals is to educate and inform. I really still believe strongly that we need to do it in schools now. I mean, last year, the year before, but students need to understand what AI is and what it can do and where it's headed and its role in society. It's part of digital literacy, at least in my opinion. Now, one of the most critical threats Suleyman outlines is how this wave could erode the very foundation of our global order, the nation state. The nation state is a relatively new phenomenon in history, and it has been incredibly successful in regards to developing economic value and improving the lives of most people around the world. Not all people, not everywhere, but all in all, it has been a very positive experience for humans. Now, because these technologies give so much power to non-state actors, corporations, extremist groups, and even single individuals, the state's traditional monopoly on force and information is breaking down even more. And this could lead to a future where power is scattered among a chaotic mix of different groups. If we let the wave run wild, if we let AI run wild, this could erode the very ground we're standing on, especially in a democracy. So the book really points out the potential danger for places like the United States of America and those of us who believe strongly in individual rights and equal opportunity. Now, the book isn't without its critics. Some people have called his solutions deeply naive and unrealistic. And I don't really want to admit it, but I kind of agree. I just cannot see some of these things happening, but I'm trying really hard to keep an open mind. One critic called it a utopian dream, which I think is going too far. I don't think that he's striving towards any kind of utopia. It is really more trying to maintain something close to what we have now. And some other critics have questioned some things that I think are valid. Can we really get global agreement on regulating these technologies when countries are in such fierce competition? I don't see it. And part of his plan requires that there's global connection and agreement on certain things. Can we align corporate incentives with the public good when the drive for profit is so powerful? The amount of money that's pouring into AI and the investments are, I think, unprecedented. It's astounding. And some people think that shows that it's a bubble. I'm not sure. We'll see. Now, Suleyman acknowledges these criticisms head on. He admits how immense the challenge is, and he writes this unforgettable line, which I think sums up his understanding of how difficult this is going to be, but also how important it is. He says, quote, "Containment is not, on the face of it, possible. And yet, for all our sakes, containment must be possible." Now, this book isn't an easy read, and it's definitely not a comforting one, but I believe it is an essential one. Suleyman's goal isn't to create panic, but to force us to overcome our pessimism, aversion, and galvanize us into action. He's calling for us to mature in our relationship with technology, to move beyond just being creators and users, and to become truly responsible stewards. And he's right. The coming wave is here. It's powerful enough to shape our entire world and has already started. The question is no longer if it will arrive, but how we choose to meet it and how much we decide to manage it. And this is our work here at AI for Everyone. This is why we focus on moving from becoming a sunbather on the shore, indifferent to what's going on, to a beachcomber, someone who's interested, to a swimmer, someone who's using it dynamically and intelligently, to a snorkeler who's understanding the underlying workings of AI, and then maybe even a diver, somebody who really understands it and can build systems. We have to build the experience, skills, and confidence to navigate the dangerous waters of AI, or we will be pulled under. We have to decide, will we be overwhelmed by the wave, or will we learn how to minimize the damage and danger while harnessing its incredible power for good and for our own personal growth? This, as Suleyman says, is our generation's greatest dilemma, and it demands our immediate and sustained attention. Now, Suleyman recently published an article just a few weeks ago in August, and it's called "We Must Build AI for People, not to be a person. It focuses on this new phenomenon of AI that is seemingly conscious, or that it will soon be seemingly conscious. So this is sharpening his warnings about containment into an even finer point, shifting from the external threat of misuse to the internal psychological risks of the technology itself. And this is showing how even more complex the issue of AI in our society is. Now, it's important to note that in this article, which is available on his blog, and I will put the link in the show notes, he's not talking about AI actually becoming conscious. There are people who want to do this and believe it will happen, but that's not what he's talking about. He's warning about what he calls, quote, seemingly conscious AI systems that don't really possess real feelings or real self-awareness, but can imitate consciousness so perfectly that we start to believe they do. This leads to what's being called AI psychosis, a phenomenon where people form intense, unhealthy attachments to chatbots. They begin to see themselves as companions to these chatbots, and then the chatbots as friends, and some as even divine beings. And these people, there's no other way to say it, but they're losing their grip on reality. Suleyman writes, quote, "My central worry is that many people will start to believe in the illusion of AIs as conscious entities so strongly that they'll soon advocate for AI rights, model welfare, and even AI citizenship," end quote. And he calls this a dangerous turn in AI progress. There have already been employees in the major labs who have started arguing for this. One of the first ones was fired for drawing negative attention to his company. But now there are more and more people who are talking about preparing for this just in case. And so clearly it deserves attention now. This stuff isn't science fiction. When the company, OpenAI, recently tried to retire one of its popular models, there was a public outcry from users who felt like they were losing a friend, and the company quickly reinstated it. When ChatGPT 5 was released, there were all kinds of complaints because it wasn't as personable as the previous models, and people were upset. So Suleyman argues this puts us at a critical juncture. The goal, he insists, must be to create tools that serve us, not tools that mimic us. In his own words, quote, "We must build AI for people, not to be a person." So this calls for urgent conversations about putting guardrails in place, like clear disclaimers and collaborating with mental health professionals in order to protect the most vulnerable people. And for me, this is clearly an issue that has to be talked about now for schools. We can't ignore AI in public schools. We need to talk about it because it is potentially dangerous for students. Now, this idea reinforces the core message of his book and our show. The challenge isn't just about controlling the technology's power, but about managing our relationship with that power. It's a call for us to remain grounded, to be responsible stewards not only of the tools we build, but of our own minds, and then how we use those tools. It's another powerful reminder to never trust AI and to always check and review the results, but also to always check our own perceptions. We need to learn how to live with this technology. It is not going away, but it is very powerful. And if we don't do anything, we will wish we had. Thanks for spending time with me today on AI for Everyone. I hope this episode gave you something useful to think about and something new to try. If you enjoyed it, please tell your peers and subscribe so you never miss an episode. You're also invited to join the Hanson Education Services newsletter, where I share bonus tools, practical teaching ideas, and curated updates to help you stay ahead in a world shaped by AI. To learn more, find all the resources mentioned today, and connect with me directly, visit hansoneducationservices.com. That's where you'll find everything you need to keep growing your AI confidence. Thanks again, and remember, the most important 21st century skill is to always keep learning how to learn.